executive privilege and what is not, as the office of the presidency and the person in that office at the time, the former president, has no role in this. That will still be a sticky part of this situation. Wolf, what this will likely lead to is a negotiating posture between Cipollone and the committee. He has already had informal conversations with them. We'll see if this compels him to actually come forward and cooperate.
Very important news indeed, and much more on the breaking news. Breaking news straight ahead. Erin Burnett out front starts right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Thanks to Wolf. Good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, a major move by the January 6th Select Committee. The committee now having a subpoena for Trump's former top attorney, Pat Cipollone. This is an important and significant move because Cipollone was there. He was there and he was with the president in the White House on the days leading up to and on January 6th. An omnipresent person there. He was involved or present during many of the dramatic moments that Cassidy Hutchinson described in her testimony, including this moment.
I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, "Please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen."
Manu Raju is out front live on Capitol Hill. Manu, you heard Cassidy Hutchinson recount her conversation with Pat Cipollone. She spoke more about him, of course, in her testimony. So this subpoena, obviously significant. What are you learning about it?
Yeah, this subpoena here sent to Pat Cipollone today demanding that he appear before this committee, saying that they have spoken to him on an informal basis, acknowledging that that did happen on April 13th, but now wanting his testimony, especially in light of all the new information that has come out. One of the big things that has come out through the course of these hearings and the course of the investigation, that Cipollone was one of those key individuals resisting the efforts to try to lean on different levels of the federal government, as Donald Trump and his allies tried to do, to overturn the electoral results. And as you've noted right there, played a big role in Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, saying that he made very clear that if Donald Trump were to come to the Capitol on January 6th, they could be in some serious legal trouble, saying that every crime imaginable they could be charged with if Donald Trump got his way and came to the Capitol as rioters were breaching the Capitol. And also, Hutchinson revealing yesterday that Cipollone wanted Donald Trump to do more on January 6th, went to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff at the time, and said to him, I want to talk to the president. Meadows responded, he doesn't want to do anything. So Cipollone could provide corroborating evidence if that it was what in fact happened, especially since he had firsthand direct conversations with the president. But Erin, it is still an open question about how Cipollone will respond, whether in fact he will fight this at all, despite him standing up to the president. He has not been willing to testify yet to the committee. He has believed that that informal interview that happened in April was sufficient. So whether or not this is enough, this subpoena to compel him to testify, remains to be seen. And what will the committee do if he does not do it? Do they go the route of trying to hold him, refer him to the Justice Department to be held in contempt? Because as we know, Erin, time is running out on this committee. Yes. They have up until the midterm elections. If Republicans take control, this investigation is essentially over. So this could draw out for some time if Pat Cipollone does not agree to come to this committee, but a big move in trying to force the Trump White House counsel to come before them.
Manu, thank you very much. And as you find out more, please let us know. Of course, any response from Pat Cipollone, who's, widely known to be an incredibly private person. And as Manu said, that informal appearance with the committee, but has steadfastly refused to come and do more. Out front now, Norm Eisen, former counsel to House Democrats during Trump's first impeachment trial, our political correspondent and co-anchor of State of the Union, Dana Bash, and David Urban, who is an advisor to Trump's 2020 campaign. Look, so lucky to have all three of you. And I know, David Urban, that you know Pat Cipollone. You worked with him, of course, in the Trump world. Norm, you also know Pat Cipollone and have had a lot of respect for him over the years. So let's just start here. Norm, what do you think happens from here? Pat Cipollone has, said, well, he was a lawyer. You've got attorney-client privilege. You have issues of privilege. These are the rules and restrictions of the office, and he hasn't wanted to come forward. Is he going to stick with that, or does this change anything, Norm?
Oh, Aaron, thanks for having me back. This ratchets up the pressure considerably. We know he did informal cooperation, so the privilege issues can be addressed. The Biden White House owns those privilege issues. That's been litigated. So Pat can't hide behind privilege. Now that he has legally binding process, is he going to want to go the way of Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who are being prosecuted for criminal contempt? Pat's a working lawyer. He can't afford to have that happen. He has a legal obligation to show up. He can attempt to dodge, assert privileges, or answer questions however he may think is right, but he can't refuse to show up, or he faces what Bannon and Navarro are confronting, criminal prosecution. So he's got some tough decisions to make.
Well, as you point out, he is a working lawyer. I mean, there's a lot at stake. David Urban, I want to remind everyone, a moment ago, I played one of the sound bites of what Cassidy Hutchinson described of the conversations, she had with Pat Cipollone on that day when he said, don't let Trump go to the Capitol. Okay, because they're going to throw every charge at us at the book if he actually goes ahead with that. She also was there when he, her account, sort of came charging in, full of stress, to talk to Meadows. And here is what she says Cipollone said.
Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. This is getting out of control.
Now, David, you also know Pat Cipollone. Here's the thing. She said that, and that is significant. Him saying it and saying it under oath will carry an additional weight, right? Because, he was there with the president. He can talk about his conversations with the president. Will this subpoena change Pat Cipollone's view?
Yeah, sure. So Aaron, look, only Pat knows that, and his lawyer, right, Mike Purpura, know it. At this point, Norm, as you know, they can litigate this for quite some time until this committee's kind of run out of steam. And let's remind everybody, like, Pat has cooperated. The committee has had the opportunity to ask him plenty of questions. They've had the opportunity to dig into this. I think what happened maybe was yesterday, after the bombshell that the Cassidy dropped about, President Trump grabbing the steering wheel of the car and there being this altercation. And then, later we find out it was an egg and the Secret Service pushed back on it and said that they'll testify under oath. When members of the committee were asked on this network whether or not why did they ask Tony Ornato about that incident, they both conveniently, Adam Schiff and Mr. Raskin, both conveniently didn't have an answer for that question. Like, why didn't they dig deeper? So I think in this instance, maybe they're trying to cover their bases a little bit better. The committee should have done all this stuff prior to this point in time. They could have negotiated all this. Pat has done the right thing up until this point. He's cooperated. He's given him testimony. He's done everything correctly up until this point. They had plenty of opportunities. So now I think maybe they're up against it a little bit. The committee had a big egg yesterday with this Secret Service piece, and so maybe they're trying to.
And obviously, we know
forward.
that she is standing by what she had to say about that incident with the SUV, and the Secret Service is saying.
Aaron,
yes, but again, I hear you.
Let's see if they call him let's say they call him in to depose him.
Right.
If the committee's so strong about that, let's see if they bring him in.
And no one should have any issue with that. If they do that, they should do that, right? But obviously, that was one of several things she said. But
it was a big thing. It was a pretty big thing.
It got a lot of attention. I think I would hope you would agree. Obviously, the more significant thing that she actually said was that the president of the United States knew that people were armed and said, take away the mags and march on the Capitol anyway, right?
Right, and they could ask Tony about that under oath as well. Tony was the person,
Right.
She's relaying Tony Ornato's statement there. They could ask Tony under oath about that as well.
Right, and as I said, they should. But Dana, let me ask you about Pat Cipollone, because he would be privy to so much of this. What is the committee thinking in doing this now? Obviously, they had a chance to speak with him before. Now Cassidy Hutchinson has relayed these conversations. What's their strategy? Because they know full well he can fight this subpoena and run out the clock.
They do. They've been inching towards this moment. They have been talking to Pat Cipollone in private about going beyond the informal discussion and really coming out and testifying publicly. That didn't work. So you remember last week, Liz Cheney publicly implored Pat Cipollone to come testify. That didn't work. And so now they're at the point where they're sending the subpoena. The question I have, and maybe Norm can talk about the kind of the delicate dance that is done in situations like this, is whether or not Pat Cipollone said, because he is a working lawyer and because he is a loyal Republican, if you want me, you're going to have to subpoena me at this point to, to compel me to go and do it.
So
that is a possibility.
I'm so glad you said
Yeah,
that, because you sort of you're prescient here, Dana, because Maggie Haberman, obviously also contributor here at the network and of the New York Times, Norm, just tweeted that a lawyer familiar with Pat Cipollone's deliberation says, of course, a subpoena was necessary before the former White House counsel could even consider transcribed testimony before the committee. Pat Cipollone has previously provided an informal interview at the committee's request. Now that a subpoena has been issued, it'll be evaluated as to matters of privilege that might be appropriate. What do you hear when you hear that? It's not a blanket denial going to fight it. It seems to me that that's sort of what Dana's suggesting.
Yeah, I hear the game show that we all grew up with, Aaron. Let's make a deal. There's Pat and his counsel are now going to attempt to establish the parameters. They'll make decisions. Do they want to preemptively rush to court like Mark Meadows did? Do they want to roll the dice? Do they want to show up and assert privilege and challenge the committee to litigate that? That's the safest thing. Or does Pat want to do his duty? He is a working lawyer. He is an officer of the court. He has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution. We've seen the most serious attack on our government in generations, never before from the Oval Office. He has critical information about that. He has a duty to his country, to the rule of law, to the Constitution, as a human being and as an American. And Pat, if you're watching, do the right thing, buddy.
David Urban.
Aaron, can I just say
Dana, go ahead.
Just add one thing, because we're understandably very focused on this incredible testimony that we saw yesterday from Cassidy Hutchinson, where she invoked Pat Cipollone for several different reasons.
Yes.
But we have to remember last week's testimony with the top justice officials, the three top officials at DOJ who testified in public under oath about the unbelievable meeting that they had in the Oval Office. And Pat Cipollone was there, that meeting where the then president, said he wanted DOJ to send a letter to Georgia saying that they were going to overturn their slate of electors. And Pat Cipollone did not want that to happen. I mean, that's one other example of something that, if it was only that story pre-January 6th, that would be a bombshell.
So, David, the context here, too, when we hear that Pat Cipollone said to Cassidy Hutchinson, this is what she said he directly told her. He said, just do it. You cannot let him go to the Capitol. They will throw every charge at us in the books. This cannot happen. And in that context, that conversation she said that she had with Pat Cipollone, I'm thinking about what Ty Cobb, a former Trump attorney, told our Caitlin Polance today. She's reporting, he told her, if this isn't an insurrection, I don't know what is. And he's saying that based on what he took away from Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, as warts and all, okay, to your point, warts and all, his takeaway was from her, if this isn't an insurrection, I don't know what one is. Do you think that anything is changing for some Republicans here, David?
No, I don't think that the people who are tuning into these hearings are base Republican voters. I just don't.
Fair.
I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think that they're tuned out. Most Americans, I think, are either on holiday or going on holiday or focused on the economy, pocketbook issues. I think, in a general election, people will look back on this and they may remember this, in 2024, they may remember parts of this, but I don't think it's really sticking. And if we just go back to Pat Cipollone for a second, I think we're talking about, let's not lose focus. They're talking about a transcribed deposition, not appearing before the committee at this point, if I'm not mistaken. They're talking
you're
about
right.
a
That is what he
transcribed
referred to.
deposition, right?
Yes.
So nobody, I wouldn't expect to see Pat with his hand raised before the committee, testifying before Liz Cheney. This will be, and it may not even be videotaped. It may just be transcribed. So, Pat's he's a great American, has done the right thing so far. So I would suspect that he'll do that moving forward as well.
Dana, one of the questions, if it occurs, of course, will be on what charges do you think they were going to throw? What charges do you think would have been appropriate, right? And that's where we are now, where you have one Republican congressman, a senior House Republican. We're not naming a senior House Republican who did not back impeachment. Told CNN today that Hutchinson, quote, about Hutchinson's testimony, this testimony will lead to indictments. Dana, the question is, would actual indictments mean anything to voters who thus far, to David's point, have not seemed to shift opinion in response to these hearings as of yet?
I mean, in a normal political world, how could they not? I mean, what if he's indicted and what if he's convicted? I mean, then what? It has to change some voters' minds. And I know David is saying that when it comes to the base, they haven't changed their mind. Of course. But this isn't about the Trump base. They're never going to change their mind. This is about other Republican voters, Republican primary voters, who might be looking beyond, maybe to the governor of the state you live in now, David, of Florida, or maybe the governor of South Dakota, or other options in the Republican field.
So, Norm, how does this play out from here regarding Pat Cipollone and this subpoena? I mean, he's already responded very quickly, but I mean, you say it's a game. We know there's a clock ticking. How does it play out?
I think we'll see just the issues that David and I are talking about, the mechanics of it. Those are the kinds of things that are negotiated. Will it be on video? Won't it be on video? If I were, as I once was, a lawyer up there on the Hill, I would really press to get this on video so you can show it to the American people at a future hearing. How long will it be? What questions are on limits? What questions are off limits? But I agree with David. I think the likelihood is he has the subpoena. He's not going to defy the subpoena. Even if he litigates, he could be held in contempt and prosecuted for failing to show. I think Pat Cipollone is going to be walking up those steps to talk to this committee.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it as we cover this breaking development. Next, the Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. You remember him. He was working at the Capitol on the day of the insurrection, right? Ushering Mitt Romney away, saving people. He was attacked by the mob, had racist insults hurled at him. Tonight, he has a question for Cassidy Hutchinson. Plus, the Washington Examiner, a conservative news outlet, slamming the former president, calling him a disgrace, saying, quote, no one should think otherwise, much less support him ever again. And the R&B singer R. Kelly, just sentenced to 30 years in prison. The details ahead.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa from the Africa CEO Forum here in Côte d'Ivoire.
This forum really brings Africans together.
Connecting Africa on CNN, in association with Afreximbank.
I am Fahad Hamid Al-Din, the CEO of the Saudi Tourism Authority. I think if you think of travelers, travelers in today's life, they want to immerse in what's authentic. I think people are less looking for, the same old in every place, and they want what is authentic. And I believe that's on us. There are strong commitments that Saudi Arabia is making, like committing to 30% of its land to remain reserves, to rewilding over 21 species, including the Arabian leopard. Or when it's designing its new projects like the Red Sea project, we're keen to make sure that regenerative tourism sits at the heart of our master planning and product design.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, today on CNN.
Breaking news, CNN just learning that the January 6th Select Committee has subpoenaed former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone, as one of the hero officers from that day calls out Trump allies who did not do more to stop him from inciting the deadly insurrection. Hours after former top White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified before the committee, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn tweeting, "I'm always conflicted when I see these courageous," in quotes, men and women coming forward with their testimony. Like, sure, I appreciate it tremendously. I really do. But there wasn't anything you could have done before we got our asses beat. And then also tweeting, to be clear, I'm not blaming her or any other witness that we've heard from so far for what happened that day. The blame belongs solely with the former president and the people who attacked us, period. And Officer Harry Dunn is now out front. He confronted and clashed with rioters that day, many who subjected him to horrible racial slurs. They screamed in his face. And I will point out, of course, Officer, you are speaking to me tonight in your personal capacity. So, the development here about Pat Cipollone's getting a subpoena to appear. So, as you know, Officer, Cassidy Hutchinson testified that Pat Cipollone directly, in a conversation with her, said, you can't let the president go to the Capitol. You just cannot let that happen because there will be serious legal consequences. All sorts of charges, right, could happen. And then she testified, as the riot unfolded, Cipollone tells Mark Meadows people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. How much do you think you could learn from hearing from Pat Cipollone testify?
Well, thanks for having me on. I don't think there's any, well, I say that reluctantly. I don't know how much more we can really learn versus how much more we can actually corroborate about what actually happened. Like I said, I don't know how much we can learn, but it's important for these people, especially the deniers and the liars flat out about saying what didn't happen. Myself and all the other witnesses, the other officers, Ms. Hutchinson, everybody that's appeared before the committee has appeared under oath. These individuals are just appearing on Twitter with their opinions. So it's a lot more credible when you are under oath and under penalty of perjury. So, I take all that noise with a grain of salt. Just if you have something to say and you dispute what is true, then come under oath and say what is true.
Yeah. So now, I read your tweets. I thought it was just very powerful when you said, I'm always conflicted when I see these courageous, which you put in quotes, men and women coming forward with their testimony. Like, sure, I appreciate it tremendously, but there wasn't anything you could have done before. I mean, it's a powerful point. Does Cassidy Hutchinson, do you think, officer, deserve credit for testifying publicly when so many other Trump allies have frankly, not only refused to do that, they're not even cooperating behind closed doors with the committee?
I think it's a very difficult question, but I do give her the utmost credit for doing what she was supposed to do and doing what's right. I'm not criticizing her at all, but I asked that question not in a rhetorical sense. It'd be fair to get an answer. Was there anything that could have been done before to stop that. Sure, everybody has all these opinions, but what really could have been done? And I really appreciate her coming forward and every other witness. And I especially want to point out how the individuals who have come forward have been few and far.
Yes.
So maybe we do need to give a little more credit to the people that have come forward, because whether it's intimidation, fear, whatever it is, people aren't coming forward without being legally compelled to do so. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that she did the right thing, and I'm thankful for that. So I do ask that question, not rhetorically or even sarcastically. Was there anything that could have been done? I think that's a fair question to individuals, over 140, 150 officers who got hurt, and to Officer Brian Sicknick's family. Is there anything that could have been done to prevent that from happening? So.
And the more we find out, one of the, I think, most troubling parts is you keep hearing, people knew that, that this was, there's going to have blood on your hands. I mean, there was a lot more where that comment came from. And during the hearing yesterday, we were played things that Cassidy Hutchinson said, and she talked about a conversation that her boss, Mark Meadows, had with the deputy chief of staff. And the conversation was about how heavily armed the Trump supporters were on January 6th. They knew they were armed. Here's what she said.
I remember Tony mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles. Spears were one item, flagpoles were one item, but then Tony had relayed to me something to the effect of, and these effing people are fastening spears onto the ends of flagpoles.
I mean, incredible detail, Officer Dunn, that they knew what that mob had. And she says it's not just that, the deputy chief of staff knew about this. The former president knew about all of these details as well. Here's that part.
Is it your understanding that Mr. Ornato told the president about weapons at the rally on the morning of January 6th?
That's what Mr. Ornato relayed to me.
I mean, officer, there you have it. They were armed in great detail. The president of the United States knew it. And his response was, take the mags away and let them go to the Capitol, where you were doing your job. And those weapons were used to assault police officers. People died. How does it feel to hear this?
I said yesterday that betrayal is one of the toughest emotions that you ever have to deal with. Whether you like somebody's politics or policies or not, everybody has a job to do. Somebody could not like me as an individual, but when they see me as a police officer, they expect me to do my job and protect them no matter what. And that's what I expected from the president. And whether I agree with his policies or not, he failed at his job. And not only did he fail at his job, he sent those people armed towards us. So it's a disappointing feeling. And I didn't have high expectations anyway, but that just totally what's lower than no expectations at all? So it's just disappointing.
Betrayal is a powerful word. I mean, you have been in the room for every hearing the January 6th Select Committee has had. That any hearing that was public, you were there. You've been a source of comfort and support repeatedly. We've seen that. We're showing it on the screen. Witnesses like Officer Caroline Edwards, the former Georgia election worker Shay Moss, the families of Brian Sicknick and Howard Liebengood, the officers who died. You were there with them. You've been moved to tears watching and hearing and seeing some of what we've had in these hearings. Yet, officer, you go, because I know it's important for you to bear witness to it. But how hard is it for you to keep reliving that day over and over and to be a source of strength for so many at those hearings?
Well, thank you for pointing that out. But I know in your last segment you mentioned, I think with Dana, about how is this influencing voters or anything like that. I don't care if anybody's mind has changed. I'm going because I'm seeking accountability and justice. Whether that influences votes or not, I don't really care. I care about the Justice Department examining all the facts and getting to the bottom and holding the individuals that committed these crimes responsible, no matter if that's at the presidential level or even some aide level. It doesn't matter. Anybody who had anything to do with the failures of that day needs to be held accountable. It's very important for me to show the committee my face every day, to show that I am holding them accountable to do their job. Me and my coworkers, we did our job that day, and I expect them to do theirs also. So I guess my face and my presence is a friendly reminder that, hey, we're still involved in this, so do your job respectfully.
Officer Dunn, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Everyone appreciates you and your actions. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. And next, the governor of Arkansas will be out front. He signed one of the strictest abortion law bans in the country before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. No exceptions in Arkansas for rape or incest, but he's going to take our questions, and he's my guest. He's next. Plus, new police audio just coming in of the moment police arrived on the scene of the worst human struggling catastrophe in the United States that has left 53 migrants dead.
Can I also get one more here? I have too many bodies here.
I'm Isa Suarez in London, and this is CNN.
There is a kind of dichotomy between the real economy that we are witnessing, be it on the consumer behavior or the optimism of the CEOs or the board. And on the other hand, there is the stock market, which is in a free fall, at least for the tech companies, and also the noise that we are hearing regarding either recession, which is coming, or inflation, which is going up. And there is this situation which is a little bit strange because there is no convergence between what we are hearing and what we are seeing in the market.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smerconish, Saturday on CNN.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessment. Do you now regret that?
It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Tonight, a conservative news outlet saying Cassidy Hutchinson's stunning testimony before the January 6th committee should be the, quote, death knell of Donald Trump's political career. The Washington Examiner publishing an editorial that says in part, quote, Trump is a disgrace. No one should think otherwise, much less support him ever again. That's just one line from, it's a powerful indictment of the former president from, as I said, the conservative Washington Examiner. Out front now, Republican governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. And Governor, I really appreciate your time. So you hear that context. And this is in the context of the breaking news this hour. The January 6th committee moments ago subpoenaing the former Trump White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. He obviously was present throughout all of this. He was with the president throughout all of this. He was depicted in Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony as warning that Trump would face criminal liability over the insurrection and saying that there, you know, the blood on your hands to anyone who, as this day continued. How important is it to hear from Pat Cipollone, Governor?
Well, he's a key person in all of the discussions, and Cassidy Hutchinson yesterday certainly indicated that he was right in the middle of it. He understood what was going on. He cast warnings as to what would happen if the president encouraged people to go to the Capitol. But I'm a lawyer. I've been a federal prosecutor. I've been in Congress during an impeachment trial, and I know how important that attorney-client privilege is, particularly when you're dealing with the chief executive of the United States of America. I would expect Pat Cipollone, who's highly respected, to respond to the subpoena. I would expect that he would want to have a court tell him that the privilege does not apply here or the public interest outweighs the claiming of the privilege. And so it's a very sensitive area that's important for all lawyers. It's important for me as governor and someone who's president to have confidence in that inner circle and the privileges that you can have those conversations. But this is obviously of great national interest. The committee has certainly made a case that the president acted irresponsibly during this time, irrationally during this time. But the question is whether he acted criminally during this time. The committee's trying to make the case. I don't think they're there yet. They're trying to get the witnesses that will bring that.
So, you know, I'm okay, which is interesting because, you know, I want to remind everyone, Governor, you know, you've come on this show several times and all the way back in February of 2021, you and I spoke. And at the time, you said Trump bears a great deal of responsibility, key responsibility for what happened at our nation's Capitol on January 6th. That's the truth. That's what you told me. I know you're saying now you don't think they're quite there on the criminal level. But how close are they? I mean, a former Trump aide told CNN today that Hutchinson's testimony was a bombshell, and a senior Republican lawmaker predicts, who had voted against impeachment, but now says that this will lead to indictments. Do you agree?
Well, it could, but let me stress that this is a public hearing that is clearly designed for the greatest public drama. And it is not designed for the usual fairness and cross-examination that you have in the courtroom. They really need to work at showcasing more fairness. For example, the personal eyewitness testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson yesterday was very powerful. The rest was as well, but you can see the hearsay part now is being undermined and questioned. And so that's what they're presenting. And so they've got to be able to call other witnesses. They're not subject to cross-examination. They're admitting hearsay. You're not hearing the other point of view. And so the public is watching this with some skepticism, and I know the Department of Justice will as well. They understand how difficult a criminal case is, and so they're going to have to be looking at it much harder than this committee is right now.
And your view is still that Trump bears the key responsibility for what happened. You just don't think that they've proven the criminal level.
At this point, that's correct. Okay. I mean, former President Trump brought the people there. He obviously encouraged them to go to the Capitol. That's problematic in and of itself whenever it results in the kind of violence that we saw.
I want to turn to another major story tonight, Governor, and that, of course, is abortion in what is now a post-Roe America. So after the Supreme Court ruling on Friday, your state had a trigger law. So a trigger law basically is if Roe's overturned, another law is going to go into immediate effect. And the law in your state that went into immediate effect is a law that bans abortions in all cases except to save the life of the mother in a medical emergency. So that's the only exception. All other cases, it's banned. Now, you signed that law in 2019, but I know, Governor, that you say you would have preferred that your state ban was not as restrictive as it is. How come?
Well, because whenever you look at rape and incest, they're the result of criminal conduct. They're incredibly tragic circumstances. And there's some in the legislature that supported those traditional exceptions of rape and incest. But the public policy in Arkansas is to protect the unborn child. They adopted that with one exception, which is the life of the mother. That was overwhelmingly supported, and that's the policy in Arkansas. I expressed at the time that I would prefer those other exceptions to be in there, but my veto can be overridden with a simple majority, and clearly they were reflecting the will of the people of Arkansas. So it is what the law is now in this state, and so we've got to make sure that we are providing the services that we need to the expectant moms, that we make sure that we improve our adoption services capability, our counseling during this time.
Yeah.
That's the process that we're going through now.
Right, and I mean, I'll say the Children's Defense Fund, you know, they rank your state 47th on child poverty, 47th in child hunger, 35th in children with no health insurance. So obviously there's, you know, significant work to be done there for children who are born into Arkansas. But on this issue of rape, Governor, yeah.
Well, it's just important. You're citing those statistics. You really, I mean, obviously, a southern state has challenges with our health outcomes, and we work very hard to improve those, and that's why we're investing more in maternal health care. But you have to separate that some from simply saying that that is a reason then not to have a pro-life position or not to protect the life of the unborn. And so we want to work on both of those together. We want to improve those statistics, but that's not a reason to say the unborn child should not have some level of protection.
So on this issue of rape specifically, and I know that you've made it clear that you would have allowed those exceptions. So I want to just make that clear on the record. But according to the FBI crime data, the latest that they have, which is from the year 2020, Arkansas actually ranks second in the United States for the most instances of rape per 100,000 people. That's got to be painful to hear, Governor. Again, I know you yourself would have allowed that exception, but you say the will of the people, you know, spoke, but it didn't actually happen, right? Because you had Roe. So I guess I'm curious, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to try to convince the legislature? Are you going to try to do something to change that part of it? Or are you simply at this point going to focus on children born out of rape or incest in Arkansas having better lives?
No, it's a good question. And first of all, any rapist, anybody who commits a criminal act, assault against a woman, they need to be prosecuted. We need to make sure that we investigate, go after that person, hold them responsible. Secondly, whenever you're looking at the exceptions, you're right. The trigger law was passed at a time that Roe versus Wade was still in place. Now that it's reversed, now that the real authority goes back to the state, experience is going to be instructive. You know, how are we going to handle this? Are we going to see real-life examples that are going to change people's thinking on that and the will of the people? We're going to learn from that experience, and I think there could be a time that has to be readdressed. But now the will of the people is very clear on that point, and time and experience will dictate as to whether that will be changed in the future.
All right, Governor Hutchinson, I appreciate your time and I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
All right, you too, sir. And as you know, you hear Governor Hutchinson speaking, governors are on the front lines in the fight over abortion rights in America. Jeff Zeleny is out front in Michigan.
I don't think many knew that Michigan would snap back 91 years to a law that would render this pro-choice state one of the most extreme in the country.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer is on the front lines of the new abortion fight, where a temporary court order is all that's keeping Michigan from reverting to a 1931 law that made abortion a felony.
No exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest. This is how serious this moment is and how dramatic lives could be upended in Michigan.
Meeting with women in the Detroit suburbs, Whitmer sounded the alarm about the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade.
This is what democracy looks like!
As fallout ripples across the country, from courts to campaigns. It's suddenly a central issue in battleground governor's races in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, where Democrats say they are the last line of defense from Republican challengers and GOP-controlled legislatures, pressing for more restrictions.
The most important economic decision a woman makes in her lifetime is when and whether to have a child. And this court decision threatens to rip that away from every woman in the country. And it's going to be up to governors, and that's why this fight's so important.
Does this issue, do you think, overtake other issues, other challenges, headwinds that your party was facing?
The inflation's taken a toll, the cost of gas, the cost of groceries. It's tough. But I also know that you take away someone's ability to make their health care decisions, that only compounds the pain that families are going to feel.
Tudor Dixon, Michigan mom on a mission.
Tudor Dixon is the leading Republican candidate for governor, strongly opposed to abortion rights.
On both sides, it energizes people. Certainly you have the pro-life people that feel like this was a win, and then you have the pro-choice people who want to see something different.
You signed the reproductive rights ballot initiative petition yet?
Abortion rights supporters are collecting signatures to put the issue on the November ballot, a movement underway for months that is catching new fire in the wake of the court's ruling.
Friday, all hell broke loose. You know, people saying, what can I do to help? We are getting a lot of people who aren't necessarily Democrats coming to sign because they just think it's wrong.
John Murray, a small business owner of a baby and children's store, said he will sign the petition because it's an issue for men as well.
If you have a daughter, if you're married, if you have a sister, if you have a mother, right? Like, if you don't feel like, if my wife feels like I'm less of a human right now than you are, she's like, you have more rights than I do right now.
A proposed constitutional amendment in Michigan is seen by the ACLU as a test run for other states, navigating the post-Roe world.
This will serve as a model for other sort of similarly situated states. It really will sort of be a beacon in the midst of a really difficult time for reproductive rights supporters.
That is exactly why opponents of abortion rights vow to fight the ballot initiative in hopes of stopping it in Michigan.
We will either have a ban on abortion that protects human life, or we will have this anything goes abortion amendment. This is a little bit of a test to see what they could do in other states.
And now there are just a few more days to gather enough signatures to put that question on the November ballot. And Aaron, people on both sides of this debate do expect them to reach the required 425,000 some odd signatures. This does not guarantee a specific outcome in November, but it does make one thing clear. This is going to be a motivating factor for both sides until November. Aaron.
Jeff Zeleny, thank you very much for that report from Michigan tonight. And next, the new details about the alleged driver of the truck where 53 migrants were found dead inside. A Mexican official now says he tried to pass himself off as a victim in order to escape. Plus, singer R. Kelly just sentenced to 30 years behind bars after being convicted of sex trafficking.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
Potato custodians are basically the guardians of the traditional knowledge, and they're also the guardians of the diversity itself.
There are about 4,000 varieties of native potato in the world, and most of them are grown in the Andes, while only a handful are available in supermarkets around the world.
Between the two of us, we have been growing these seeds for 20 years, preserving them since the day of our wedding. My mother told me, now I want to teach my daughters.
It's a laboratory that's not managed by scientists, but it's a laboratory that is basically more than 10,000 years of evolution in the hands of farmers.
I can't let them be forgotten, because all the flavors, I know now how to grow them, and in that way I can keep the varieties alive.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Assalamu alaikum. Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this. Ничего страшного. Okay. This is the front line. On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about. A lot of people are wondering why. You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present. The human cost is right here. And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing. I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine. This is CNN.
Just in, new information on the deadliest human smuggling attempt in American history. We're now learning the name of the driver of the truck and the charges against him. The death toll today going up again. More people now dead from that. 53. A Mexican official says the driver of the truck pretended to be a victim before he was ultimately arrested. U.S. officials have not confirmed that specific detail, but Rosa Flores is out front in San Antonio tonight. And Rosa, what are you learning about the charges and this driver?
Well, the name of the driver is Homero Zambrano. He's a 45-year-old man with residence in both Brownsville, Texas, and Pasadena, Texas. And Aaron, the charges, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Texas, is one count of alien smuggling resulting in death. If convicted, he could face life in prison or death. We are learning a little more about what happened based on this press release that just was released by the U.S. Attorney's Office, them describing that bodies were found inside the tractor trailer, outside, and also in the brush, and that Zambrano was hiding in the brush when he was detained. Now, Aaron, I should add, there are 4 people total who have been charged so far. We've discussed the 2 others on your show before, the individuals who are facing weapons charges. But we learned today, just now, that an individual by the name of Christian Martinez is also charged with 1 count of conspiracy of human smuggling causing death. Now, according to these documents, they linked Zambrano to Martinez because of cell phone records.
So Rosa, also we are finding out as this number has climbed, people who had been fighting for their lives when they had made it to the hospital have also now succumbed. We are now at 53 dead, and we've learned that among them are children. What more do you know about that, and who are the survivors?
You know, I just talked to the San Antonio police chief, and he was reluctant to really describe the scene, Aaron, because he said it was so gruesome, but he found words to describe the indescribable. Take a listen.
The floor of the trailer, it was completely covered in bodies. Completely covered in bodies. And there were at least 10 plus bodies outside the trailer, because when we arrived, when EMS arrived, we were trying to find people who were still alive.
Now, 11 individuals are still hospitalized. My colleague Nicole Chavez was able to talk to the Archbishop of San Antonio, Aaron.